Right, we have a mailed-in MacBook. My free educational content that I'm posting to very few people has finally paid off. Not really. We've had quite a few things sent in. This was liquid damage. The top side's actually quite clean, and that exposure adjustment on that camera looks terrible. This was taken into the Apple Store, and kind of the, you know, classic thing. Hey, you got to get a new laptop and your stuff's gone. $1,500, I believe, was the quote from Apple. And then this person, I think, had a friend take it apart and look at it and go, yep, that's liquid damaged. The friend did not put some things back together correctly, but, you know, they were doing a nice thing for someone, so, and I think that's fine. Like, just this headphone jack thing's under there. And then the classic on these, the angle sensor is corroded, and I swear every time you see a 14 or 16 inch MacBook Pro with any liquid damage, this part is going to be bad. And sometimes it can actually cause the machine to not turn on. I can short out, so we'll look at the schematic. I think it's like 1 PBE, 1 V8 AON gets shorted out. I feel like there was something else kind of goofy that I saw on here for how it was put back together, but perhaps that was it. Let's see what this does on an amp meter. I already unplugged the battery terminal. I did kind of look at this initially. Here I have another, that's not this device's current draw, that's a Samsung laptop we're updating. So this device does 5 volts and like nothing. We can measure our PB bus voltage on our Le Fuse. Oh, let me actually open up the multimeter software. Measure on the fuse. I think it was like 1-ish volts. Let's see. 1.7. Something's pulling that down. I don't think we actually have a short on PB bus though. That's a little bit too high. We'd see like almost, you know, no voltage at all if we had a short on the PP bus. And as you can see, we don't, right? The line's pretty high resistance, so probably some later stage rail. And frankly, there's probably just a mess on the back side of the board. I believe it was spilled through the keyboard. Maybe it was in a backpack, something like that. In any case, I'm going to take this apart and we'll have a look. Let me see what it does with this unplugged, actually. There's a non-zero chance this is it. And you can see essentially the same behavior with that unplugged, which is what we thought. Okay, let's take this apart and put our detective caps on and find what is causing MacBook to not work. Well, well, well. These ports, you might think, oh, we got to replace them. We could. They don't really look burned or anything, so I'm just gonna clean them with a Q-tip because they cost, you know, $7 a piece. And I'm not going to put this kind of charge onto one of my customers. This is really needed, and these look fine. And fundamentally, right, this is just wires that connect to a thing. They're just a little bit dirty. That's all. We're going to clean all of these off. You can see all 3 were quite bad. And surprisingly, I've already looked at the board a bit. Also, several hours later, we kept having customers come in. These look fine. I assume all of them are okay and don't need to be replaced. And why burn an extra $20 if we don't need to? The board, however, does have some troublesome spots, and I assume this is going to be the bulk of our trouble. It's around our ISL, charging IC. Also had a little bit of schmutz right here. This is probably superficial. We can clean it with the brush and some alcohol. And then we also had a little bit over here. Now this has become one of the primary errors I checked in the hour-and-a-half long video where we had one of these with a dead PMU. Very often these will get corrosion in this area, and what you'll have, if you do have corrosion in this area, you'll very likely kill your top side PMU, I believe. This right here. Yeah, these guys. So we have this low voltage PMU line, and then we have PB bus voltage right here. So that looks fine. Over here again, it's like we see some schmutz, nothing really, you know, it doesn't look like any electrical problems have occurred there. I kind of assume that this person's friend cleaned some stuff, which does make me sad because it makes it a little bit harder to tell. But there are some obvious problem areas like we see around the speaker amp over here, pretty common spot. Edge of the board is actually really clean, which is kind of weird. I would have expected a big mess around, CD32s or something or other, but not so much. Honestly, great. It's annoying to clean. Speaker amps, though, on both sides, these lower ones don't look happy, so I think I will swap this guy and the one on the other side. We're gonna... And then kind of this area, basically. Then other than that, I think we're just cleaning. We have basically a charging chip and then speaker amps on both sides, basically. This is a familiar friend. Secretly, it's an ISL 6259, but now it's called the RAA 489900. Critical. That it is. And probably most of the stuff, let's say in this area, this looks pretty bad. We can see the electrosis magic has worked its evil spell on this area. I'll probably just put some music and fast forward over the rework, because at this point we're just gonna be replacing a bunch of stuff. Unless something interesting happens, we'll see. All right, so a lot of people coming in today. MacBook turns on now, and really we just replace the stuff around that ISL area. That's kind of it. We can over-explain it a bunch if you'd like, but, you know, there was stuff that looked bad to me, and I replaced it. And now, MacBook seems to turn on. Wonderful. Keen observers among you might have noticed I did not replace our speaker amp things, even though I said I was going to do it. I kind of think the corrosion over here was a little bit superficial. I still just kind of got some flux on there and reflowed it, but it kind of just didn't look that bad. I don't want to put a bunch of thermal stress on the board for no reason. And things that are working you generally shouldn't replace. So, and we'll put it back together, test for audio, that sort of thing. But really, this was very obviously, you know, fucked up in this area. We can see some pretty obvious signs. And just for example, there's most of these ceramic capacitors, I'm sure, were functionally fine. I just didn't trust them into the future. Primarily this one. They're just kind of like grayed on the top. That's fine, basically. But if you have ones where like the, you know, end cap on the top is like broken off, you should replace them. There might be no bueno. I'm actually seeing this resistor kind of looks like the pad underneath could be burned. I'm going to double check this one. We'll actually just make a quick measurement here. We're looking at, what are we looking at? Right here. So this should have continuity to this. So I'm just going to check these two components and see if they have continuity as I'm looking at this. Yeah, okay, so we're fine. 0.3 ohms from here to here, which is what we should have, like nothing. Okay, that did look a little bit sussy, but it's fine, which is good. I'm going to clean this off a little bit more, and then I'm going to put it back together, and we'll test it out, see if it's working. I think so. Yippee hooray. MacBook lives. You know, I moved my camera closer to show the angle calibration, but after taking the sensor out, it actually didn't look that bad. Cleaned it off, works fine. So no new sensor needed, no new ports, just board fixie. I think you still need to get the password from this person to test, but the MacBook startup chime sounded fine. I'm still just looking at my camera, looks so overexposed. Basically, what we had here was a mess around our charging IC, and we replaced kind of all this stuff and some of these guys and this resistor and this chip. You know, clean up the solder, reflowed our speaker amps on this side here and here, and then we clean out the board with a brush and some alcohol and a magic eraser and some acetone, and you know, those spots we did rework on. This area we had a little bit of junk over here, and that was pretty much it. And then the angle sensor and all the ports we cleaned off as well. Pretty straightforward. I would say this had no curveballs. Very nice board repair, so that's good. I like getting those sometimes. Hopefully this helps someone. Really, in any case, if you see corroded stuff, it's probably bad. You should replace it. Rule number 1 of fixing MacBook board. And then just don't spill stuff on your MacBook. But if you do, send it to More Than a Fix. Return shipping free on any board repair or data recovery. What a deal. All right, well, we'll see you next time.